Diamond. I am a kindergarten teacher at Lenora B. Smith Elementary School. I graduated from Emory University about 2 years ago, and that's when I joined the Teach for America 2020 Corps and came here to Miami, Florida. So my project is titled Resolving Conflict in Kinder, and I focused on social emotional learning for students, and that goes hand in hand with conflict resolution in the classroom. And thank you, Matt, for flipping between the slides. So my agenda for today, I want to talk to you about the problem, the solution, the results, and the learnings from my project. So the problem has felt like a systemic one to me. A lot of schools do not have a social emotional curriculum or education that is mandated in the school. And I saw that play out in my classroom because students were not knowing how to solve interpersonal or intrapersonal problems. So they were fighting, they were using their hands, not their voices, to have discussions and work through problems. There was a lot of conflict in my classroom because of that. So the solution that I came up with was to use literature, multimedia, and class discussions to help work through and teach conflict resolution, as well as behavior management and relationship building inside the classroom. And those all go hand in hand, but really focusing on the strategies of how to do those things. So the results that came about in my classroom, students were practicing conflict resolution on their own, as well as behavior management before they try to deal with the conflict. And I'll talk about some of those strategies later on in my presentation. And then I also focus on relationship building between students. So hopefully that would carry outside of the classroom as well, which is something that I saw. And a learning that I wanted to highlight was that social emotional learning and strategies needs to be taught and implemented in all classrooms, because a lot of classrooms, it's not mandated there. So some students have social emotional learning and skills being taught to them, but it needs to be a heavy focus, similar to that of academics. So the problem, some of the things that I was observing in my classroom, I was observing pushing, yelling, tattling on other students, students using mean faces and swearing at others. And some of the things that I wanted to see was a discussion. When students have issues, I wanted them to discuss and talk about the problem to solve it. I wanted them to practice relaxation or calming strategies before working on solving the issue, and do a better job communicating with each other, as well as helping out in the classroom, helping other students feel better, solve issues, things of that nature. And the catalyst for my project and me wanting to work on social emotional learning in the classroom was one particular student who I'll highlight some photographs later of, who would always yell, scream, push, and things like that when he was upset or had a problem within the classroom. So I will highlight him again later in the presentation to show the results that I saw with him, as well as the rest of the students. So the solution that I came up with was to use literature, multimedia, and class discussions to help teach social emotional learning and skills. And there's one story that I wanted to highlight in particular that I saw really effective results from. So the story is called The Jar of Happiness, and there's a picture on the slide of that story. The story was really great to share with my students. It's about a child who has a jar with happiness inside, and he can't find the jar, and then others are trying to share different ways that you can be happy and find happiness. So I had a class discussion about the story after reading it with my students, and students came up with things such as practicing stretching or meditating, relaxing, breathing, things like that. So it was solutions that students came up with. And one in particular that we really focused on was meditating. And for 5 and 6-year-old students, it's a little bit different from us as adults. But to them, it was closing their eyes and thinking of something that makes them happy or a happy place. And then we brought multimedia usage into it. In this day and age, students kind of need that and or want that. And so the pictures on the screen, one was a video from Sesame Street, and one was like a calming monkey that my students stretched and meditated with in class. So here are some images of the results. So relationship building and conflict resolution was so much stronger in my classroom after reading a couple of the stories during the class discussions and multimedia uses that was part of the curriculum that I was looking at. So the picture on the far left is one of my favorites. It's two of my students who had so many issues in the beginning of the year. They would push each other, they would fight, they would scream. And so after we started reading these stories, and specifically the Jar of Happiness, I saw these students like in a corner and they were kind of being quiet. I wasn't really sure what was going on over there. And then later they came to my desk and told me that they breathed together and then they were hugging. And I thought it was the most wonderful thing. So that's what that picture is. The second one from the left is two students. One of them was upset, the one sitting, and then the one standing is like consoling the one that's sitting and like rubbing his back, which was really cool to see. And then, because that was a strategy that we used as well, like after you talk about what the issue is, then you can help the other student feel better. And then the third picture on the right is actually one of the students is the same one that was crying in the second picture. And typically he cried and then like didn't really talk about what went on. But I saw him, it was actually at recess discussing the problem with the other student. And then when we were walking back to the classroom, they had their hands around each other. So I like quietly took a picture of that one. But yeah, so these are just some images of the relationship building and conflict resolution after it had been finished. These are more results, and this is not something that I thought would be a direct result of teaching social emotional skills in the classroom, but it absolutely was. Improved partner work and like group collaboration, which led to academic improvement. So these are just some pictures of my students working together. I tried to incorporate way more group work and partner work because it was possible. And before I started these different activities and lessons with students about relationship building, conflict resolution, etc., they had a really hard time working in partners and pairs because there would be an issue where one thought there was one correct answer and the other one was angry, didn't believe them, or they like stole a pencil, like little things like that, and the students couldn't work together. But I found that they were actually able to work together after working through these different lessons in the classroom. And it was really awesome to see them do that because they learn better. There was stronger academic achievement from working together and learning from each other. So these are just some pictures of classwork, but I saw improvement in iReady lessons, the passage rate, teacher created tests, as well as math assessments and reading assessments from the district. And these are just the results broken down a little bit more specifically. So improved conflict resolution skills, improved interpersonal and intrapersonal skills, so solving things with other students, as well as calming down and working through problems independently as well. Improved self-regulation and behavior management. Students were more helpful to others. They would console others, help others work through problems if they weren't able to do that. Students were beginning to rely less on me and more on themselves to figure out problems. So we see that a lot with younger students, that they just go to an adult, which is often something we tell them, if you can't solve it, come to us, which is true. But I saw that a lot of my students were working through things on their own before coming to me, which was really great to see, and then improve scores and test results as well. Some more specific examples that I didn't want to leave out. One of my students asked me to put stress balls into the prize bin. Some other students of mine told me that they were meditating and relaxing at home. When I asked them in the morning, you know, what they did the day before, they would say, I meditated, I stretched, I relaxed, I breathed, things like that. And I also saw at recess, which I'll show in a later slide, and students checking in and really helping each other like handle their stressors and issues in the classroom. So some of my project learnings, which I want to discuss, and I also just included some pictures of students meditating in the left side. So I found, which is what I had expected at the start of my project, is I expected to see a difference in students' behavior. So systemically, how I talked about earlier, there is at least in my school, so I can't speak for all schools, but many schools, there is not a social emotional component that is mandated. It's highly encouraged in a lot of schools, but it was not strongly implemented in my school. So that is a systemic issue that I have found, because in academic curriculum is a mandate, but social emotional learning is also extremely important, which will then aid in academic achievement as well. So something that I'm taking away is that students need to be taught how to resolve conflict. We can't expect them to do it if they don't know how. Similar to academics, they need to learn how to solve conflict and manage their own behavior. And I also found one of my learnings is that student test scores and progress monitoring greatly improve. So again, I didn't necessarily expect that, but the relationship between improved behavior and improved test scores and ability to work with each other really showed in my classroom. Student takeaways, I would have students tell me that they're meditating, breathing, stretching, relaxing at home. And I used to have students tell me that they had an argument with their sibling, or they wanted to do something, but their parent didn't let them. But instead, they were coming in and telling me that they were using these techniques at home when they were upset. So those are the student takeaways. And then these are images I mentioned earlier. Outside at recess, if a student is, doing something they're not supposed to, or they didn't have great behavior inside, they have to sit out of recess instead of being upset about it. This day I found one of my students meditating, and then the three others followed suit as like a strategy to mitigate their anger about not participating in recess. So future steps. So currently I'm working with the other kindergarten teachers to construct a social emotional curriculum. So this already exists in many schools, but we wanted to do something that works with our students, focusing on conflict resolution and self-regulation, things of that nature that I've been speaking about. And we're already using, we have inspiration from other curriculums because it does exist. But we wanted to make it something specific for our school and our classrooms. So the curriculum is kind of like a foundation that can be used for other grades as well, starting in kindergarten, but adjustments can be made to branch out and have first grade, second grade, and K through 6 as a whole. Thank you for listening to my project and the different learnings. This is just a picture of a bunch of my students hugging and smiling, but I really appreciate your time, and I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Sasha, I think it's so awesome that you're instilling these skills so early, and it seems like just based on what you've said, it's really clear that there's such strong student buy-in. I'm just wondering, was there a particular strategy, whether the read alouds or the meditation, like, is there one strategy that you thought was like most salient, or like that students gravitated to the most, or anyone that's been like most prevalent and most helpful from the student perspective?
Yeah, I think meditating was the most effective because, well, first of all, the students came up with that one themselves. So I kind of had to like aid them to understand what that actually means. So that's why I would say close your eyes, like think of something that makes you happy, something that is age appropriate. But they came up with that on their own. And then that's the one that most of them, when they came to me and told me they were using a strategy, or I saw them doing in the classroom, it was typically meditating. And I think that that is probably the strategy that's most different from what they were already trying to do. So I think that's why that one stuck with them the most. So that may not be the most effective strategy in other classrooms. But I think how you mentioned buy-in, I think that they really practice that one on their own because they came up with it, as opposed to other strategies that I suggested to them that they didn't latch onto because it wasn't their own.
Awesome, thank you.
Awesome. Go ahead, Nina. Go ahead.
Sure. No, I had the pleasure of actually going to your classroom briefly with Matt, and I was absolutely in awe. Just, I mean, just how they behaved. Really, really, like they were so focused and into what you were teaching. So kudos for that first. I know that's challenging for kids that age. So it's wonderful that you're coming up with this, and other classrooms are talking about this. The teachers are thinking about implementing it, and I hope that's something that more classrooms across the district participate in something like this, because obviously is essential. Have you thought, or is there like as an additional resource that the students can use at home? Is there like a kid version of Calm, the app Calm, that maybe that they could tap into?
That is a really great idea. I have not looked into that. The multimedia that we use was in the classroom, but that's a really wonderful idea and something that I will look into because the students are on their own phones anyways when they go home. I did communicate with parents these strategies, so perhaps that's one of the reasons they were able to do them at home if there was a reminder from some of the parents. But that is the next thing that I will look into because it's a really awesome idea for them to use an app at home or some kind of technology to continue practicing these strategies. I have not looked into that though, but I definitely will. Thank you for that.
Oh, of course. Hopefully there is. And let us know if there is.
Sasha, awesome work. Something that I'm wondering is, well, first I have to point out how our star student was sitting there meditating in that photo. I think that that's amazing. Does he has he been meditating often?
Yes, and that was a student that I was talking about in the beginning, the catalyst for me starting this project. That's why he was featured in a lot of the photos. Yeah, he's like always doing one of the strategies and everyone follows off of him, which is awesome because that student was like one of the main students that had like outbursts and like negative behavior within the class and it affected other students. So for him to be kind of like the central student that's using these strategies was really impacted the other students.
Yeah, yeah. And then I guess my other question, and I noticed that Quez put a question in the chat. My other question is like, did you get any resistance from kids on using these strategies and how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say resistance, like outward resistance to the strategies. There were definitely some students that latched onto them more than others. Like sometimes when were closing our eyes and thinking about something that made us happy, there would be students that would like open their eyes and like try to make a joke out of it. But I think the students that were actually focusing kind of helped bring everyone back. Some days were better than others, but I think the best part about it for me and like the reason why it was effective for some students is where I saw the change was the biggest change was in the students that I could tell were doing it on their own at home or like at recess or at lunch and things like that. So I wouldn't say I didn't get any pushback, but there were definitely some students who didn't use the strategies as much and I could tell. So I would have to remind them. But even when I reminded them, they were definitely able to do a better job, like calming down and then having a discussion than prior to that. And I also see Quiz said, did I ever get any pushback from parents? I never got pushback from parents. Perhaps if I worded some things differently, I could have. Like when the strategy of meditating, I explained it as having the students think of something that makes them happy because like it's a very advanced thing to actually meditate. So I used wording and strategies that made sense for the age group. So I'm sure there are some strategies that maybe would have shown more pushback from parents, but with the ones that I use, like meditating, relaxing, stretching, breathing, those kinds of things, as strategies to do before you then have a discussion about what made you upset, how to fix it, I didn't really see any pushback from parents.
I'll give some teacher wait time and then. All right, let's give it up for Sasha. Awesome job, Sasha.
Thank you.
All right. All right, and so with that, let's move on to our next presenters for the night, Caitlin and Zarami, to present on MDCPS 411.
Hello, everybody. So Zarami and I decided it's really weird with these noise canceling headphones, to kind of create a resource hub for parents. So we decided to team up so that it wasn't just my students and getting data from my students, but from various different demographics within MDCPS. Cool, so just kind of how we're going tonight, some intros of me, And Zurami, our issue, kind of the data that we saw across the district between our two schools, and just asking our fellow staff members to take the survey, our plan, our project, and where we see the future going. Cool. So introductions, my name is Caitlin Poloni. I went to the University of North Texas. I got a BA in communication studies as well as integrative studies, which just meant I took a lot of random courses and needed to make a degree out of it. I teach at Citrus Grove Middle School, so that's one of the I think most interesting Teach for America spots, just because it is right in the middle of Miami-Dade. There I taught developmental ESOL as well as intensive reading, and I also managed a caseload of students, and then I was involved with Guitars Over Guns, and then multiple different Teach for America involvements. Now on to Zurami.
Hi everyone, my name is Zurami. I am also a second-year core member. I graduated from the University of Notre Dame. I majored in design and Portuguese and Brazilian studies. And for the last 2 years, I've been teaching at Carrie P. Meek / Westview K-8 Center. I taught self-contained kindergarten all of last year virtually, and this year was my first in the classroom physically, where I taught self-contained first grade. So I was able to grow with the group that I had last year. So that was a great opportunity. And yeah, we're going to be talking about some things that we saw. We're going to be going into our data and our findings next.
Yes, so kind of our issue that we saw is that across the board, parents, especially in Title I schools within MDCPS, often had a hard time connecting with their students' education, whether that be communicating with parents, how do I get into the portal, how do I get my child's grades, where do I go for immunizations, just random questions that they had, and they didn't know where to start their, just like where to find these things, because the internet is a very big place. So we saw that this was an issue that contributed both to behavior as well as academic performance that was affecting the student. So often when talking to parents, they respond with, there's just too much. I don't know where to begin. So we decided, well, why don't we create a place where you guys can kind of begin and then go from there. So first we thought we needed data, right? Of course, we needed to know what were parents needing, right? What age group were we working with? And kind of what were the problems parents were having. So we asked, like, on the basis, like, how many kids do you have enrolled? 50% said they had one, and then more, the other half had more than one child enrolled. Just an age range that we kind of got from people. We had a lot in 6th and 7th grade, and then we had a good cluster in the elementary level. And then we kind of asked them, like, our main points, like challenges. We thought the main would be like communication, homework, grading, community resources. And then of course we had some people fill in other things like nothing, tutoring, English. And so we saw a vast majority was communicating, as well as kind of just like, how do I handle my students' academics? Other challenges like we saw was the language and students not having access to technology, both at school and within their home. We just asked them kind of see how they're communicating with their teachers. Often it was just with their personal number. And then Class Dojo was the other big component. Just kind of the familiarity they have with homework help. A lot of them said they did know where to get these resources for homework. A lot of them though said they didn't know how to navigate the portal. So while they understood these resources, they didn't understand that they had a whole portal to access more resources. They knew that they had helpful resources, but again, they didn't know kind of where to find them. And then we asked them kind of an open-ended question, and these were about the results that we got. What would have made MDCPS like transitioning in easier? They said transportation, having better resources of what paperwork is needed, especially for those that are new to the country, like what documentation do I need? What shots, what medical history, what do I need so that my student can successfully be enrolled in your school? Like I had some students who told me Like they'd been in the country for 3 months, but it took them so long to get everything they needed that they didn't get to enroll in the school until they were here for 3 years, 3 months, and had all that paperwork. As well as having someone to communicate with in their home language. And then one that we saw that was like, oh, we're going in the right direction, right? Is a parent told us that having a brochure with district resources would have been extremely helpful in this transition, in this time of coming to this new school district or this new country. Is just having like a document where they can access those resources really quickly, as well as communication. So now I'm going to switch it off to Zarami, and she's going to walk us through kind of our plan and where we took this data.
Yeah, so while we did this survey, we figured out that communication was kind of our biggest struggle. And even coming into TFA, when I would ask parents, like, what's happening, like what's going on, it was always tended to be a lapse in communication. So we thought that direction of brochure was a great direction to head in. And we decided to create a resources where parents have a place to gather information quickly. While we were looking at the Dade Schools website, there's a lot of information, but it's very overwhelming, especially if you're a new parent, if you don't know the language. So just a way to streamline the information and make it more tangible and feasible to understand. After analyzing the data points, we saw that parents struggled with communication, homework, tutoring, navigating the portal, grades, and language. So these are things that we address in the PDF that we came up with. And the project. So do you want to go on to the next slide? Yep. So we created a PDF. Are you going to open it up? So here are some screenshots of the PDF. I can also share it on my end so that you can see what it looks like, and I can run you through it. I'd be more than happy to organize your life. Yes. All right, so Caitlin, you're pulling it up. So this is a prototype. It has not been tested. It has not been on, like, parents haven't checked it, but it is something that is teachers can edit. It made it on Canva, so pretty easy to navigate. I know teachers get a free Canva membership, so we can use that. And this is as if it were to be for the 2022-2023 year. So this can be a resource that can be printed out or given to parents, or it could be put on your Class Dojo site in the beginning of the year. So here's the first page, first day of school. And then if you want to head to the next page, an indexing what's going to be, what's in there to organize it all. Next page. We have the school calendar. I had a lot of parents asking if they had to come on teacher planning days. Things that we wouldn't think are usually questions were coming up more frequently than thought originally. So having all of those little things in there. Important links, this would be an enrollment, so registration, the guide, the packets, immunization packet, which school should I attend, kind of like a frequently asked questions, but just streamlined. Community resources in the next one, so project startup, public library has like little tips and tricks on the sides, kind of let them know things that I would recommend parents do. The parent portal, so it has everything needed to understand the parent portal. On the next one, we have the student portal and how to navigate that. Again, all of these sites are already created. The resources exist, they're all on the Dade School site. This is just a matter of organizing it so that they know exactly where they have to go. And all of the hyperlinks take them to these sites. Next page, how to check grades. That was another one that I got a lot in the beginning of the year. I teach lower elementary, so I have a lot of new parents, new guardians who don't understand how to get to grades, how to use the grade book, how to check how they're doing, how to check report cards, how to check effort grades. So that's all in there as well. How to get involved. I had a field trip. A lot were asking me questions about getting involved in school. This includes, getting into PTSA, how to become a school volunteer, how to register. transportation, can I ride the bus? Questions that came up in our survey that we wanted to answer. And before and after school care. So again, we can keep adding, there's so much. This is our last one, so this is communication. What platform? It's important to establish communication with your teacher. So just knowing that different communications exist, but it's important to, from the get, understand that which source you're using. So just having them understand all of these things that already exist. And that's our last one. But again, it's editable, it can be edited, things can be mixed up depending on what the parent needs. And for the future, one of the things that came on the survey a lot was language. And these links, the ones that I directed them to, were in English, but there are links in Creole and in Spanish. So we would like to work on a PDF that is in Spanish and in Creole for those guardians that need the resources in that language. And we would like it if teachers would use this. I feel like I would have used something like this in the classroom in the first day of school for the parents who have these questions. And we hope that this resource grows and transforms.
Yes, and then as of kind of like a final quote that we kind of thought about parent involvement that we saw was that parent involvement in education is crucial. No matter their income or background, students with involved parents are more likely to have higher grades and test scores, attend school regularly, have better social skills, and show improved behavior and adapt well to school. So kind of with that, we created this platform that hopefully next year we can provide to incoming core members, first or second year, and kind of have this virtual or printed document where they can pass it out to their parents at the beginning of the year. And yeah, so thank you guys for listening to us. If you have any questions, I think this is question time.
Number one, amazing work. Like, salute. I think it's always weird. I never know when to start talking because I'm like hand clap, snaps. I'm not sure. Like virtual stuff is so weird. But anyway, like amazing stuff, amazing work. For me, it's all about doing it for the kids, of course. But like, I think my question is, and this is like in an effort to make it so that people are moving forward, the work is moving forward. Why didn't this exist already? And I know that might not be an answer that you have already. Like, I'm curious. I don't know if anybody has an answer, but like, why didn't this exist already? And does this work keep going whether you all are involved or not? Because I think that's like the end goal, right? It's like sustainability. Yeah, I'm reading. I'm like, yeah, this I would imagine Miami-Dade already had this. Why not?
Yeah, I think one thing that we were thinking about is like if we do something virtual, like a website or a PDF, that we would always be able to, no matter how far removed we were, being able to fully update it and still have that connection to Miami, and kind of keeping it kind of as our little project as we move forward with our lives.
It's also so funny that you said that because I sent this to two friends so that they can check it over and see what they thought. And they were like, how does this not exist? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. So it made my life so much easier.
I just want to commend you guys because it's obviously just an amazing resource, but I think you guys were also really creative in like the questions that you asked parents, as well as like ways to disperse it. Like you didn't just post it on a website, you linked it to Dojo and like, I think went above and beyond to make it more accessible to parents and guardians. My question is, have you gotten support from admin in order to like more widely disperse this? Because I think obviously the whole district could benefit, not just your schools and your students' parents.
Honestly, no, I think that's the next step. And we should have probably included that in our next steps. Now that it's finally done and we've gone through it and we were intentional about everything we put in there. And I feel like, I know for me, I would want to go to admin and say, hey, I think this is a good resource, talk to the teachers at my school and make sure that they all have access to this resource.
Yeah, same. I've kind of talked to like our counselors about like what do parents need? If I give you a resource, will you give it to parents? And they're always like, if you give us stuff, we'll give it to them. But it's usually like we're not gonna go and find it, but if you give it to us, we will. And so that's just like a lot of what I've seen across my school is like, yeah, give us the resource and we'll give it, but we're also not like gonna go searching for it, which I think was also another problem that parents were having.
You guys already have somebody lined up to translate?
We were talking about that before. We're like, if we would have done this on Google Docs would have translated it for us so easily, but Canva does not have that translate function. So I know we were thinking like the top 2 languages besides English in the district are Spanish and Creole. I'm not fluent in any of those. So my answer for that is no.
I could translate it in Spanish, and I could talk to one of the teachers at my school, see if she's willing to translate it to Creole. And that's something that we can work on from now to the end of the year.
Oh, that's great. And hopefully somehow we can use our resources to kind of, you know, let other teachers know that this already exists and that they can use it.
Thank you.
Awesome
That
work.
was across the board.
Yeah.
Yes, like, thank you guys.
Let's give it up for Caitlin and Zarami one last time. Zoom claps, reactions, chats. All right. I'm gonna prompt us for a really quick break before we continue on with Lucine. So let's come back together at 6:55.
Good evening, everybody. Well, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm sorry. I'm not good at public speaking. So let's get started. I'm very happy to be here and see familiar faces. You all have done such a wonderful job. Before I start, let me just say that. Well, I titled my project Step by Step Restoring Relationships, and I have not only like a personal reason for doing that. It was because this project almost like saved me from really leaving my job because it was a process that I had to not only do for myself, for the students, for the school environment, but it was also for myself. So this one really, this project, I hold it dear to my heart. That's what I do. Alrighty, so a little bit about me. Hey, go ahead. My name is Lucine Anger. My last name is a French last name. It doesn't mean I'm an angry person. I'm actually very nice. That's my name. I taught teaching. I teach third grade ELA at Lenora B. Smith Elementary School. I'm a 2022 EPIC Corps member. And also I'm in, I had my degree from FIU, so yay. Okay. A little activity that I have for you. It's not gonna take long. I just want you to just take a look at this picture and tell me, what do you see? You can come off mute, you can put it in the chat. Just tell me, what do you see? What can you describe just from looking at this picture? I am an ELA teacher, a reading teacher, so you have to look at the illustrations sometimes to make some predictions to get a feel of what my project is going to be about. So you have the next 30 seconds to do it, to 1 minute. Get smiling, encouragement, support, could be fun, could be drama. I love this. Okay, all right. Well, thank you everyone. Well, this one I took it without them knowing. I'm really bad at taking pictures. I took this one because this picture means a lot to me, because those 3 little girls I've had a lot of conferences with them because they used to pick on each other, especially for this little girl right here. They used to pick on her because she's Haitian. And this is how my classroom environment, it became a little bit very toxic because most of my kids, they did not know how to appreciate or celebrate differences, the diversity, and creating a safe space for each other in the classroom. Thank you for everyone who participated. All right, that's the problem. So student misbehavior in the district had intensified, I think due to the pandemic. This soon resulted in ineffective disciplinary practices in school, especially in my school, and toxic classroom environment. Yeah, as you can see, my students, when they are going through something, they're just like, they shut down. I give up. I don't want to be in this classroom. I don't want to do anything. I just don't want to be here. And it's just because between them, like among them, there used to be so much conflict, so much drama going on. And then it created, the learning environment was not positive anymore. It was just like, maybe we should address this situation before I can move on. You know, if they're not having a good time in the classroom, they probably will not learn anything. I don't need to worry about teaching an idea for the day. Root causes. Like I said, pandemic, almost half of my students, they were online. So I feel like they're kind of behind when it comes to socialization because they were home most of the time for the past 2 years. Lack of accountability. At school, we do not have like a culture where there set expectations for students as a school. I felt like every teacher, they were trying to do what they can in their own classrooms, but as a school, we did not have that. And when something happens, it's just like, okay, you're just gonna sit in the front. But it didn't feel like they were learning anything. They were not accepting, they were not responsible for what they've done, or they were not accountable for their actions. And that also goes for parents and, you know, lack of parental involvement. So most of the time we call parents and say, hey, this happens and I really want you to speak to your child about something. And then they would tell me, oh, okay, but the other students were picking on them. Again, lack of accountability. And lack of proper socialization. So they didn't know how to, they had I don't want to say they didn't know, they had a trouble. Like it was hard for them to just be in the same environment, do something together without like getting into trouble, like Ms. Martin said earlier. Okay, the approach. So what I've done, I use restorative think sheets to resolve conflict in the classroom and provide a means for students to properly express their thought process, because they couldn't really have a conversation about what was bothering them or what make them behave the way they behave. Really, that's a solution. So I tried to, build a relationship. I have community circles and fellowship activities were used, you know, as a way for them to build a relationship and explore their interests, celebrate their differences, because they had a hard time doing that. For example, we had sessions that included, like, you know, weekly circles or mindfulness. I'm not so good at doing mindfulness, so I had the counselor come in and, you know, do the SEL portion for me. I couldn't do this one. And also with to perform, I use a restorative text sheet. So these really, they were used for students to identify and acknowledge, address harm, needs, and causes, anything that have arisen in the classroom. I use this to help me see where those things were coming from different, you know, point of view. like whether it was the person that caused the harm or the person who was armed. I needed to see their point of view, and giving them this, it was very helpful for me. And also it was very helpful because sometimes something happens and you cannot have a conference with the students right away, but you still need them to think about, you know, what they've done. So this was a very helpful tool for me as a teacher. This is an example. I learned the students' names because some of you probably will have them in the future. I don't want you to have any preconceived notions. Okay. So I chose this one because this one is very dear to my heart. We usually think of restorative justice. We usually use it because something is going on and we need it to help us, like, you know, repair something. But for me, now that I've done this, I feel like it should be used as a preventive measure. It should be preventive. You should be proactive using these tools. I had 2 little boys in my class and we were doing an activity for intervention, and it was time for us to go to PE. And I said, everybody, you know what, close your laptops, put your heads down before we line up. One of them decided, you know what, I'm not gonna follow the teacher's instructions. I'm just not gonna do it. But I have a rule, the longer you take, the longer it's gonna take for us to go to PE. And they really like the PE time. And one of the students, they were not happy about what the little boy was doing. And then they use a slur, like, I'll quote them, they use a cuss word. And the entire class could hear it. And they just stopped. When they heard the word, they just stopped. They were like, ooh. And I didn't say anything. The other students didn't say anything. I was just like, you know what? Here you go. I gave them the think sheet. What caught my attention after I gave it to them, they completed it. Of course, they're gonna leave some part blank. I know how they felt. Now, when I read their accounts, it was similar. They both told me what happened, but they both had different reactions to what happened, of course. But what caught my attention when we finished lining up for us to go to PE, the student that caused the harm left the line. And I was like, don't you see that we're in line, we're going to PE and blah, blah, blah. And when I said that, he was like, no, Miss Anger, I need to go back to so-and-so and apologize because I shouldn't have done that. And I'm talking about matters of minutes. It's not something that I had to have a conference. Usually I have a conference with them so we go over it together and they can take it home so parents can sign and everything. But this one, I didn't have to do anything. Like, it happened so fast that I was like, oh, wow, this is actually working. And that really made me very happy. So that's the story behind this example. Outcomes. So these pictures, that's me with them. We take lunch outside. This is one of my fellowship activities. We have lunch outside. We have Popsicle Fridays. And this picture, one of my students drew it because one of my students doesn't have many friends. So one of the little girls drew this to give it to him and said, like, you don't have to hug the tree. We are actually here for you. So I had a positive learning environment. I was able to really have not only set strong expectations for my students, but they were able to achieve it. And to achieve that, to have that positive learning environment as a teacher, I had also to give a lot of support for them to achieve that. Discipline as a learning process. So they didn't see discipline means teaching. So instead of use a punishment, for example, saying like, no PE because you did this, no PE because you're talking during my lesson. I took the time to really go after over what happened and how we can prevent that from happening in the future. And we increase accountability, like I said earlier, like they accept responsibility. I shouldn't have done what I did and I caused harm. So what can I do? What actions can I take to make sure I repair the harm that I caused? And it involves social bonds. My students, they could sit and work in a group without, getting into a fight. Well, sorry. So students, they were led to support one another's success and help each other in times of hardship. Students were taught about being responsible and accountable for their actions. I already went over all these things. I just wanted to show you more of a summary. Oh, sorry, I clicked on it by mistake. This is just to support what I was just saying. Like, I teach them, instead of when someone does something right in school, they would go like, oh, so and so again. But I teach them, like, you need to celebrate them, because when it's your turn, they're going to be happy for you. Little things like that. Oh, let me go through this. Alrighty. Space for growth. I believe, like, for me, oh, sorry. I believe for me, I should have, for my project, establish a culture of pursuing restorative practices more, because this is not something that I hear like they talk much in my school at all. Innovate new ways of delivering things shouldn't, for me, it was mostly when they see paper and they have to use a pencil, they sometimes think of it as work. And this was one of the biggest pitfalls, because they didn't want the writing part. So I should probably think about new ways I could incorporate it for the students who don't not like writing. Push for more parent involvement and documentation. As part of that tank sheet, parents should sign it. It's a long process, because after I have my conference, I let them know. Now, most of the times, those papers, they return them back to me unsigned. They are not signed. And get more supports, reinforcement and incentive across all disciplinary areas. Like I said, prevent the behavior from happening, because I wouldn't need to do all that if at first I used a punitive approach. You do this, no PE. I was mostly like, okay, I'm just gonna assign a consequence for this behavior when you don't do it. But when I started to really, I did set the expectations. I was not permissive. I just provided the support for the students to achieve the goal or the expectations I needed them to do. So I feel like it worked. Do you have any questions for me? That was it. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Awesome work, Lucine. Similar question to something I asked earlier. Did you get any resistance from any of your kids?
Resistance, yeah. Because the moment I usually take out the sheet and they see what it is, they're like, oh man, not this again. So they didn't really like it, but sometimes I felt like it was a way, it created like, if you don't want to do it, then sometimes you will not do anything that will make you have to complete a paper or to fill out a paper to explain what you did. But the resistance was there. All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
All right.
Oh,
go ahead.
My class won a project, so we had treats. That's why they're lifting the little bags of treats, because we won a contest.
Way to go, Lucine. Let's show Lucine some love in the chat. Awesome job. And last but not least, we'll be having Grant present on enrichment for high achieving students. Grant, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Matt. Let me get this PowerPoint shared. Okay, are you able to see that? Perfect. Okay, so my name is Grant Parker. I graduated with a BSPA in Law and Public Policy from Indiana University. I am a second-year core member. I teach at Norland Middle School, which is in the North region, and I teach 7th grade ELA 2, mainly advanced, but a few regular sessions as well. My project today is enrichment for high achieving students, and I'll explain that a little more in detail. I want to start off though with a quick story about one of my students who asked me not to share their name, but in front of you is their first diagnostics results from the beginning of the year. And again, keep in mind, I teach 7th grade. So right off the bat, I'd like to point out a couple of important things here. They placed in 9th grade overall, right in the very beginning of 7th grade. They had a comprehension literature and a comprehension informational text score in 10th grade, a vocabulary score of late 7, but they told me if they hadn't gotten bored, that would have been 10th grade as well. They had a Lexile reading measure that indicated they were ready for college level text and a national norm of a 99th percentile. This is obviously a high achieving student that I'm dealing with here, and I do have a few more like them as well. And so this created an issue, right? How are we going to deliver this student 7th grade materials for the next 9 months, keep their attention, make sure they're engaged, make sure they're continuing to have academic rigor in order to be prepared for the next grade level, high school, and so on. And that was the genesis of the idea that I had for creating enrichment for high achieving students. And the problem that I was aiming to solve is that there is a lack of enrichment activities that are geared towards high achieving students, especially in the school that I'm in. And I've talked to some other teachers and seen that across the district as well. And we're going to talk a little bit first about some of the root causes for this problem. Schools are incentivized directly to raise lower performing students up higher, right, by school grades and by ETO. Generally, schools are graded by the state and by the district, and that grade is highly correlated to certain terms that we hear like L35, L25, bubble students being raised up and catching up to grade level. But they're not incentivized to take a 7th grade student and move them up a grade level above where they're supposed to be. There's just nothing in it for the school in terms of pure grading. Teachers and administrators fall into this false assumption that high achievers will maintain their academic pace without deliberate intervention. The old theory goes, if they're a strong student today, they'll be a strong student tomorrow, they'll be a strong student next year. And that's simply not true. Your brain is a muscle, just like any other muscle. You have to continuously exercise it in order to continually grow. And when a student becomes complacent, especially in middle school, it generally translates to them becoming average or even below average when they enter high school. And I'll talk a little bit more about the data behind that in a second. And another root cause is that many high achievers are not equipped with the self-advocacy skills to speak up and say, hey, this work is too simple for me, or this work is something that I learned 2 years ago, or I could do this in my sleep, right? And teachers normally take a few months to catch on to this because they're seeing it in their work products and saying, wow, you're doing this with ease. And the teacher usually is the one to initiate the conversation. Rarely it's the student or the parents. So these are some of the root causes of this issue. I mentioned this briefly before, but there was a study conducted. It was a very comprehensive study. It looked at metadata as well. It was conducted by the Fordham Institute in 2011, and it posed the question, do high flyers maintain their altitude? It looked at the performance trends of top students and examined them at an individual level to see if you're a high flyer now, will you always be a high flyer, and what sorts of course materials drive that continued growth. And what the most important takeaway from the study was is right in front of you in bold. It reads, the study finds that many high achieving students struggle to maintain their elite performance over the years and often fail to improve their reading ability at the same rate as their average and below average classmates. So once again, you have these high achieving students in middle school who are unable to keep up pace because again, they're not being challenged. And this study raises an interesting question. Is our obsession, I think that's the collective R, academia, education as a whole, is our obsession with closing the achievement gap and leaving no child left behind coming at the expense of those talented 10th, those high flyers, those high achievers? And again, in my classroom, I would say the answer to that is it is. So education is not a zero-sum game, even if you consider schools' budgets and district budgets. Enrichment for one academic demographic does not have to hinder another. So if you design an enrichment program to bring up lower performing students, there is a way to design that with inclusivity to those high performing students as well as those students who are already on grade level. Enrichment opportunities are often perceived to be expensive, costly, taking a large hit to the school's budget, especially with discretionary spending. However, enrichment opportunities can be free or very low impact on school budgets, and I'll discuss that here a little more in a second. One group does not have to lose for another to win. And again, if a program is designed correctly, it can be inclusive to any academic group that you want to focus it on, as long as you substitute out the materials. So the program I created, I started off with 3 different implementation methods. The first method would be physically meeting with the students before or after school. And it would be just similar to tutoring. It would be either one-on-one or in a group. I did more group sessions, I believe, than one-on-one for sure. And we would go over our materials that way. And I'll discuss the materials and content on the next slide. The second method was through differentiated instruction. Most schools have a fairly rigid framework that they use in their core classes. For example, at Norland, we use a 40-40 with 40 mandatory minutes built in for differentiated instruction. If the differentiated instruction level material was too low, I would substitute it in for some of the materials we're going to look at here in a second. And finally, the third implementation method was asynchronous. That was allowing the students to work through the material on their own and getting corrective feedback and working through problem solving the difficult parts together. So the program design, again, we talked a little bit about content or implementation method. Here's the actual content that we were working on this year. The first bucket I would call core enrichment. This is taking content and standards they're seeing in their core classes and elevating it to the level that they're actually testing at. So for example, if I had a student who is doing very well on iReady 7th grade, I would move them up to 8th grade lessons or even higher. Supplemental enrichment is the second bucket of materials that we looked at this year. And those are supplemental materials that are related to a core class competency, but not specifically within a standard they would see within the next year or two. An example of this would be having a 7th grader create a poem using iambic pentameter, a skill they won't really develop until 8th or 9th grade. And the third and final bucket that I wanted to include with these enrichment activities was personal and career development. This was specifically oriented towards how do we see how our education path leads to potential careers or careers that we might want to take on in the future. An example of some materials we used here is a great program called Maui Curriculum that really deals with SMART goal setting. And SMART, of course, is an acronym for a specific type of goal setting. And that was very productive as well. So this program had some strong results, and I'll talk about and contextualize these as we go. But the first metric I looked at was progress towards typical annual growth, the median score of that taken from the iReady diagnostic between diagnostic 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. The students who participated had a 152% progress to growth compared to a 50% non-participant progress towards typical annual growth. The next metric I looked at was percent of students with at least 1 grade level improvement in their iReady diagnostics, again, through AP 1 to 2, 2 to 3. I had 84% of students who were participating in the program hit that metric, whereas 61% of the non-participants hit that. And then the average percentile increase, again, we looked at that national norm that looks at 7th graders only. I had an average of 8.7 increase from those 2 diagnostics compared to 3.9% for non-participants. Now, again, this is not to say that the program was the sole cause of this. Again, these are high achieving students. They do well, they're expected to do well, but there are high achieving students as well in the non-participant data over on the right side who did not participate in the program yet would have qualified for the program. So I believe it's fairly accurate. Again, not to say that the program is the direct cause though for every result we see here. There's also anecdotal impacts and results I'd like to share with you from the students. I had students tell me how happy they were to work on something that was actually interesting and challenging, right? If we had to do something every day that was mundane and boring, we would tune out too. So they had new materials, they felt challenged. Some were frustrated at times, but at the end of the day, I believe they all came away feeling some degree of challenge and definitely taking away new knowledge. Other students reported learning new concepts, things that they hadn't been exposed to, things that they heard their older siblings or parents talk about that now they felt excited they got to deal with at a young age. And so we went through those. I also had students saying they can now see how what they do in 7th, 8th, 9th grade can translate into what career or future you have. And that was a rewarding thing to hear for sure. I also had anecdotal evidence from our parents. Parents said they were happy that we were meeting the students where they were and not just forcing them into the mold of whatever curriculum was given to their grade level. I also had parents say that they loved that we allowed their students to explore different topics. And that was rewarding as well. I also want to stress that this was not created in a vacuum. I want it to be able to be replicated and even done at Norland Middle School, regardless if I'm there or not. So I wanted to just really end by focusing on the feasibility parts of this. And that is that no matter the implementation method you choose, the content is cheap, if not free, and therefore has a low impact on school budget. And then the teachers can volunteer time. If we're doing differentiated instruction framework, the teachers already use this framework. It's happening within regular school hours. And asynchronous, again, that leans a little more heavily on the parents and the students themselves to take it on their own. But again, all the resources are low cost, already purchased by the school, already available. For example, if you're doing this in 6th grade and you common plan with an 8th grade teacher, there's your resources right there. It's no additional cost to the school's budget at all. With that being said, I wanted to see if there are any questions, comments, or concerns.
Yeah, I think number one, kudos to you, Grant. I think that I was one of those students. Like, I'm above the level, right? Like I'm testing 2 or 3 grades higher, and people are struggling to give me the information I need. And as such, I struggled when I got to the next level because I wasn't pushed to the degree that I needed to be. And so, like, number one, kudos to you for even like pioneering something like that's that important. I think beyond that, my question is, what next, right? Like, what adds on to this for the student, for the teacher, because it's a crap ton of work too, right? Like, for a teacher, this is like an additional layer. It's not hell a lot, but it's an additional layer of work, number one. Number two, are we doing kids disservices by, yeah, I'm giving you the work that you need, but I'm still keeping you in this grade level, right? Like, the next year you go to the next grade level, who's to say that this continues? And so, like, to me, it's like, great, yes. What do you think is next for this realm of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll kind of take it in parts. So first of all, in terms of what is next, I think that what is next in an ideal world, and this is something I'm going to talk to my AP about and see kind of how the steps go, but having it organized as a formal program similar to FIU All-Stars, that way it's something where it can be set into the budget a year or two in advance. So that way it's more formal. Again, though, I don't want to get bogged down on the cost because it really is low cost. All of the resources are out there that I use. I didn't pay $1 for a single resource we used. I got them from either teachers of 8th grade or 9th grade. I got them online. Not to say that I would expect every teacher who wants to use this program to do that, but hopefully that library would be built up over time for potential resources. And then doing the students a disservice, that kind of veers into a little bit of kind of out of the realm of control of one specific subject. So for example, the student who I showed you way in the beginning, though she was extremely strong in English, she would not be eligible to skip a grade because she just does not have the math or science skills for that. So I think in a perfect world, yes, if a student is fully 7th grade ready and they're in the 7th grade and they don't need it, they would be able to move up to that 8th grade and be met at their level in all their classes. But I think for the majority of students, especially in middle school, they have one really strong area they excel in if they're a high achiever. And it's not so much across the board. And if it is so much across the board, I would hope that they would be excelled at that point.
Grant, I think this is so amazing, and you should like run for school board or senator or president, whatever you want, but more so a comment. But one of the reasons I think this is so cool is that the school I worked at after my placement school had high school. So they did a lot of like studies on like getting to and through college. And they've actually found that the students who ended up at more selective college actually had higher matriculation rates because A, they're getting more scholarships, and B, they also just have like the study skills and stamina to like persist through college. So I really think like you are setting them up for long-term success. So I really just appreciate like how you're playing the long game here, even in 7th grade, which I think is really incredible. So nice work.
Thank you, Olivia. I appreciate that.
Grant, awesome job. Nina, I keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
I know, we're like on the same wavelength. Good. So you made a point early on about how sometimes it takes a while for teachers to catch on that some of the students are, at a higher level than the average. Have you thought about, what happens after they leave you? Is there something that can be put in place or be given to them? So, come wherever it is, whoever their next teacher is going to be the following year already knows, what to expect, and not maybe lose some time at the beginning of the school year, not addressing the situation.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a big component of it, and I didn't dive too much into it here because it's not the main focus, but I think it's important, is the self-advocacy piece. I'm a big believer in that with high achieving students, low achieving students. I've worked with a few students who have 504 plans with that. And being able to really put how you feel into words to a teacher is such an important skill, especially in middle school. So what I do tell them and what we did work through is going through that self-advocacy when you are in 8th grade, when you are in 9th grade, when you are in a lecture hall in 10 years or however long. How do you go up to that professor, that teacher, and say, this is what would work for me? Can we meet somewhere in the middle? What accommodations could be made? So I do hope that they take those advocacy skills and use those to their benefit if they find that the next grade level is not challenging them where they should be. But the other nice thing about being 7th grade is I do know who they will have next year in 8th grade, if they stay in the school. And I know that's not a solve all problem because there will be students who transfer out, there will be students who go to 9th grade. But at least for the immediate future with these students that I've worked with this year, I'm able to kind of direct towards their 8th grade teachers. Oh, you have so-and-so coming in your class next year. They're really talented, even if they don't speak up in class. Their essays tricked me into looking on Google to see if they were plagiarized for 3 hours. So I try to let them kind of know that way. But again, I think the self-advocacy portion is critical there.
That's great. That's great. And hopefully, once they get in 8th grade and they're wrapping up 8th grade, that whatever teacher they have, it may be in addition to, which is very important, what you said about self-advocacy is, I don't know if it makes sense or not, but, some sort of recommendation, that the teacher, the current teacher can give to the future teacher, like, this is where the student is. So just again, so they have something to refer back to.
Definitely. I love that idea. And maybe even something official that's signed that can stay with the parents to where they have that on record and they can make sure to note that when they enter a new school or a new classroom. I like that a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, great work.
Thank you very much.
Awesome work, Grant. My work or my question was just around like, I feel like one of the arguments for enrichment programs is sometimes like, well, what about the other kids? Like, and this idea of like, it's like not fair, right? That like some kids are getting this like special attention or special treatment, which, we're meeting kids where they are. So did you see any of that kind of crop up in your classes? Like, oh, why do they get to work on this? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the only time the other students would necessarily be exposed to the fact that it was happening would be during those DI rotations, which I'm already last year and earlier this year before even starting this project, I'm very regimented about. And so they know that they're working in groups based on their strength, but not necessarily I never have a high group or a low group or a middle group. It's here's how you did on this standard within a certain test or within the diagnostic, and then they work from there. So the other students, there was not a lot of pushback because they're already used to being split up and worked with individually based on their performance within that standard. I think some did realize that, hey, you're maybe talking to these students more on day B of the rotation, but again, it's nothing out of the usual because we do the rotations either way.
Awesome, y'all. Let's give it up for Grant. Grant, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna close this out for the evening. Let's give it up one last time for all of our amazing presenters for tonight. Sasha, Caitlin, Zarami, Lucine, and Grant. And to our couple guests who are still here with us, y'all know that you can reach out to our participants to learn more about their projects. Y'all can, second year core members, y'all can feel free to drop your email addresses in the chat so that Vanessa or Nina can get in touch with you if they need to. But other than that, I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening and thank you for being here tonight and good night.